The Accidental Entrepreneur is brought to you with the help of our sponsor, AWeber, the world's leading small business email marketing and automation service provider. Since 1998, AWeber has helped more than 1 million small businesses and entrepreneurs through its suite of web-based email marketing, automation tools, and education. AWeber, the best option when it comes to marketing your business. The podcast is also brought to you by the Alternative Board. Since 1989, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has been one of the leading peer advisory and business coaching organizations for independent business owners and CEOs across the world. By facilitating peer advisory boards, private one-on-one coaching, and strategic planning services, TAB helps business owners improve their businesses in ways that change their lives. And be sure to connect with our affiliate sponsor, GSM Growth Agency. They're boosting e-commerce businesses to 6 and 7 figures in revenue and cover everything from ads and social media influencers to making your website better. GSM Growth Agency focuses on taking businesses from startup success to bigger success, going above and beyond to make sure growth sticks around. They're all about cool ideas, lasting partnerships, and making your mark in the e-commerce world. And be sure to support the podcast by ordering some logo merchandise from our online store. Listen to all of our sponsors' commercials later in this episode and follow their links in the show notes to learn more about their products and services.
That's right. So fast forward a number of years, we had, it was hard in the sense of like, it was just a breathless sprint across the finish line every day, it felt like. But we were winning, and so it was worth it. It was a lot of fun to you build something and see it shine. And as we started growing, I remember it was like we hit around the $6-7 million mark. Something changed, right? And I couldn't really put a finger on it. I didn't really know what it was, but something about it got harder again.
Really?
That was the first time that we kind of had this recipe of if we wanted to grow, we would add a sales rep, we'd add a couple of consultants, and that was $1 million a year. That was basically our strategy. We like to think it was a lot more complex than that, but it wasn't.
That's basically right?
Yeah, and that worked great until it didn't work. We brought someone in, and it was $750,000. It's like, okay, that's fine. We brought the next year in someone in, it was $500,000. And across a number of different places, you can't just say it was one sales rep because it wasn't. There were just things started to feel a degree or two off. There were the folks who were there in the basement days, and then there was the new people who were coming in who didn't quite understand that. There were leaders who had built from the ground up, and then there were other leaders that we had hired in, and there were just these kind of differences in riffs, right? Sales was feeling the pressure, and so they were pushing in one direction, and then our consultants were feeling the pressure of like, hey, what in the world did you just sell, right? How are we supposed to do that? And
all right, welcome to another episode of the show. I always say this, but we have another great guest. We're meeting some great people over the last 5 years. We're coming up on 5 years in February. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast directory, please leave us a 5-star review whenever you can. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, like the content so we can keep connecting with people like Scott, who's coming on the show in a minute. So let's get on with today's show.
The information provided in these episodes is for entertainment purposes only. It is not a guarantee of success or to be construed as advice of any kind. You should always seek advice from local licensed professionals before making any decisions.
The dictionary defines an entrepreneur as a person who organizes and manages any enterprise, especially a business, usually with considerable initiative and risk. People often start a business without much choice, perhaps due to a job loss or just being dissatisfied at work, and they come up with an idea they just know can be successful. They become entrepreneurs by accident. That is to say, their success or failure happens by accident, not with intention. My name is Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a corporate attorney and a business advisor. You're listening to The Accidental Entrepreneur, my podcast about how to achieve success on purpose, not by accident. Join me along with our monthly guests, where we share our knowledge and help you get a hold of your business. And now on to today's episode.
Hi, I'm Scott Ritzheimer, founder and CEO of Scale Architects, and I have helped nearly 20,000 founders scale their businesses or nonprofits, and I cannot wait to share with you the tools that I've used to do that and some practical tips you can take and run with starting today.
All right, Scott Ritzheimer, right? Is that correct? Am I good?
That's it. You nailed it.
Well, with Beinhacker, I got to learn how to pronounce last names. So, yeah. So I appreciate coming out. Where are you located?
I'm down in Atlanta, Georgia, just outside the perimeter, as we like to say.
Nice. Do you have a cousin in the north, Alpharetta?
Yep.
Yeah. Roswell's a cool little town. We went for dinner.
We're right across the river.
Oh, there you go. Cool. Yeah, you guys have like ridiculous traffic problems down there. I have no idea.
That's what everyone who visits Atlanta says. Most folks who are from Atlanta will just, we find a way around it. But yes,
I know.
It's not a fun place to drive.
2 hours to get there. I'm like, it's only like 4 miles,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. All right. So we're going to talk today about, I'm curious as to where the 20,000 number comes from, 20,000 businesses. So you'll share that with me, but maybe we want to go back first and talk about your background. I usually do that and share, your little journey. And then we'll start talking about all the things you're doing in terms of helping people to scale. Does that make sense? Okay.
Absolutely. Well, these two stories are actually kind of one and the same. So we might be able to answer both for you. But I love the name of this show because it's how I've introduced myself for the past several years now. I started it totally by accident. Now, a slightly different set of circumstances, though, that led up to that. Mm-hmm. So I was actually in ministry at the time and was looking to pay the bills, just get a part-time job, right? That's all that I wanted. And met a guy who lived nearby who had a business and started working for him in like the proverbial mailroom, if you will. I was answering emails that came in.
Yeah.
And so about 3 months after I start there, he does a deal, sells the company, and owner finances it.
Okay.
And
Scott, what kind of company was it?
This was a company. It was a company called Start Church. So it helped start churches. Back in that day, we started churches, but based on the name. Now we branched out quite a bit in later stages, but helped folks that were getting started from from nothing to something, 0 to 1, and was bought by another company who was in a similar space. Wonderful people, very intentional leaders. And I watched them over about the next 18 months systematically, but unintentionally destroy the company.
Yeah.
And almost destroyed theirs in the process.
Right.
There were so many things that went wrong during this time.
Yeah.
And I had a front row seat at it. I was one of the 13 employees that went all the way down to 2.5 employees. I was that half.
Right.
And the thing about the story that's interesting is there's no bad guy in the story, right? There's no villain that was trying to mess it all up.
It's just the acquisition is the easy part. It's all after that. That's the really hard part. Running and integrating and all those types of things. People think they're good at it just because they could buy a business.
Yeah. And there's so many ways that it went wrong. But again, I had this kind of front row seat to see, hey, here's how it's not working now, right? Here's how a transition doesn't work at all. And in the midst of what was a really difficult time, like even for me, I mean, I could feel the weight of it. I actually went to the doctor. I thought I had stomach ulcers. Like, it was really heavy.
All right. Yeah.
And I had like nothing in the fight. It was a part-time job. I can't imagine the magnitude that they were feeling at that time. But long story short, they get about 18 months in and they just throw the white flag. Like this is we've taken it as far as we can go. We've given it our best shot. It's not going to work. If we keep going down this road, it's going to sink our company too.
Right.
So they called the previous owner and they said, hey, we're done. We're going to declare bankruptcy. If you want this thing back, we'll give you a first shot at it. You can have it back. It's yours to try and do whatever you want with it. And so he's
or anything. They didn't.
No. And yeah, we won't get to the whole financial side of things. It wasn't pretty.
Right.
And so, he goes immediately jumps in. They said you have 24 hours. So he jumps in a U-Haul and drives up to where they were located in Nashville and says, hey, we'll take it back. We'll take whatever the assets are that are left. And at this point, it's like 3 computers that don't quite work anymore. And one of those office chairs that like all the padding is worn out of the bottom. That's all that was left of what was over $1 million company just a year and a half prior.
Yeah.
And so he calls me from the U-Haul and he's like, hey, this is what's going on. I know you'd expressed some interest in seeing the company succeed. Would you like to come back on with me as an owner and help me to at least take our shot and see if we can rebuild it? Now, this is September 2008. Not a great time
No,
to start a
everything
business.
collapsed. Yeah, real estate was in the toilet.
Absolutely. So our first 6 months, we're just watching the world around us implode, and in the kind of typical entrepreneurial way, we've got no other choice than to make it work.
Yeah,
We went, we didn't get paid for a while. And it was like, well, a lot of people are not getting paid right now, so I guess this is about as good as it gets.
Right.
And again, long story short, we were able to make it work. We were able to get the phone ringing. We were able to make sales happen. We were able to actually bring back some of our previous staff, and we really just hit the ground running. And that started what was just an exceptional run. We were doing double, close to triple digit growth for, I think in the intro I said 10 years, but it was for about 13 years,
Okay.
uninterrupted. And we were doing it again. The company was called Start Church. We started with churches. Then we realized, hey, ministries need help. Then we realized, other nonprofits need help. And then we realized businesses need help too. And so we started branching off into a wider and wider audience. And that's where that 20,000 number comes from. Is there 20,000 different entrepreneurs, founders, both in the business space and in the nonprofit space. And they would basically look up how to start a church, how to start a consulting business, how to start a fill in the blank. And we'd be one of the top Google searches. And so we were getting in at the ground level with these folks. And it was just a luxury when you look at from a career perspective, the opportunity to see 15,000, 16,000, 17, 20,000 different founder stories firsthand was really a remarkable opportunity.
Yeah. So you almost were like restarting your own business that was help other businesses start, because your business had been devastated and lost most of its customers and employees and everything. And you kind of had to figure out, how do we fix this and what did they do wrong? And now what happened to the other company? They were gone. They went out of business, and
the other company survived. They're doing great to this day. We have a pretty good relationship with them.
Yeah.
It was some strain there, but no, they did fine once they recentered on what they did best. They got their focus back. They did really well.
Was that now you're doing all the scaling, so you understand it better because you've gone down 20,000, projects. Was that the problem with that? They were really, even though they were complementing industries, they really were out of what they focused on. They should have just stayed with what they're focusing. You guys did this, they did that. Is that really what the problem was?
Yeah, I think if they had to do it over again, I think they would probably say they bought a business and gave up it's really one and only asset, right? The business was highly, highly centered on the skill set of the founder at that time. And that was something that took us years to reverse.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those things, like when you go through a negative process like that, you start thinking, hey, how can we build this differently? And that was an active thing for us. Yeah.
Yeah. I think during the pandemic, a lot of people had to deal with that, right? Resilience. How do you turn things around? And I think that's a huge problem with small business owners. They become too dependent on, it's not always the owner. Sometimes it's some person who was like the office person who was working for the owner. And now he or she runs the whole business. And you almost have to say, listen, we're going to pay you, but we want you to take the next month and a half off. And we're going to see if we can run this company without you here, because businesses become very dependent on things like that. But it's interesting that the business that you were in was almost the reason that you went out of business, because they weren't able to do what you were doing for people. Yeah. And helping.
Yeah. That's a great irony of the story. I think you can turn that around and say we had to do it twice to prove that the first one wasn't a mistake.
No, but it did prove that. It's a good case study, right? People say, well, why should I hire you to help me? Well, we built a good business and then we sold it and they weren't able to build the business. We took it back on its knees and we built it again. So it's a good testimonial to yourself, right? In terms of how you do it. Okay. So that was 2000. Well, you took the business back in 2008, right?
That's right.
Okay. And the business is still going now, but you don't own it anymore?
That's right. So fast forward a number of years, we had, it was hard in the sense of like, it was just a breathless sprint across the finish line every day, it felt like. But we were winning, and so it was worth it. It was a lot of fun to to you build something and see it shine. And as we started growing, I remember it was like we hit around the $6-7 million mark. Something changed, right? And I couldn't really put a finger on it. I didn't really know what it was, but something about it got harder again.
Really?
That was the first time that we kind of had this recipe of if we wanted to grow, we would add a sales rep, we'd add a couple of consultants, and that was $1 million a year. That was basically our strategy. We like to think it was a lot more complex than that, but it wasn't.
That's basically right.
Yeah, and that worked great until it didn't work. We brought someone in, and it was $750,000. It's like, okay, that's fine. We brought the next year in someone in, it was $500,000. And across a number of different places, you can't just say it was one sales rep because it wasn't. There were just things started to feel a degree or two off. There were the folks who were there in the basement days, and then there was the new people who were coming in who didn't quite understand that. There were leaders who had built from the ground up, and then there were other leaders that we had hired in, and there were just these kind of differences and rifts, right? Sales was feeling the pressure, and so they were pushing in one direction, and then our consultants were feeling the pressure of like, hey, what in the world did you just sell, right? How are we supposed to do that? And we just started to see kind of conflict and complexity popping up all over the place.
Right.
And that would be one thing if it was just that. But this from the world of founders and entrepreneurs, it's also super, super personal, because when you've got someone who's not keeping up, you have a manager who's not keeping up in a small business, they're probably a really close friend. Right. So not only do you have the whole management side of that, how do you correct things when a manager is off? But there's like, am I really going to fire a friend?
Right.
Is that what this has become?
Yeah, that's often why people hold on to people that they shouldn't hold on to.
Yeah.
Friendship.
And so for us, while we were able to continue to grow our top line, what was becoming really, really concerning was our bottom line.
Yeah.
We went from, high 20s on our profit margins to, down into the single digits over the course of about 3 years. And it's like, something's got to give, right? The more we sell, the less we keep. And I thought it was just me, right? But now that I've been working with so many other founders, now that we've been on later stages of their stories,
yeah.
I've started to see that a very common, almost universal principle is that founders will go through this later stage that feels like this is it. Like this is about as far as I can take this thing. This is as big as our company can go. This is as far as I can take it. This is as much as we can sell. Some type of ceiling that we start to bump up against, and we start to wonder, like, is this really as good as it gets? Is this as far as I can take the company?
Right.
And it was at that stage that we really started looking out for help. Right. We started reading the business books and implementing them, and they were helpful. We started to go out and try and find some coaches and advisors, and mostly for the fact that we were really bad at picking the right ones, but also because a lot of coaches are not very good at picking their clients. We lost more money on following the bad advice of coaches and consultants than we did in any other bad decision we'd ever made.
Because it was just like a bad match with your business and your problems, and it wasn't the right, like it's common, right? Attorneys are like this too, right? They think they can do everything, and you can't. I specialize, everybody's special. You can't be a generalist now. So was that what the issue was, that you had, sound like you had what I call a silo problem, like as businesses grow, divisions of the company stop communicating, and they're all kind of dealing with their own problems, and they're not taking into account that, hey, if I work with this department, maybe we can solve both of our problems. And some of that's leadership. But I also think, like you said, sometimes it's for the entrepreneur to say, hey, this is bigger than me. I need to get a guy who's used to working at that level, not the level that I started at. I think that's very hard emotionally for business owners that have built this business and feel that they have to be, right, the person who guides this ship all the time. Yeah. The real successful guys that I've met and have had on this podcast don't feel that way. They're more than happy to say, this is not my expertise. This is what Scott does. I'm bringing Scott in to deal with the scaling issues, and I'm going to do this, whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you find the right How many frogs did you have to kiss to find a prince?
Yeah, we kissed a couple of them. It was a great illustration.
Yeah.
So what that does, though, and for anyone who's out there who's like, I've had that experience, and I've been surprised by this. Like, I am a coach and consultant now, so saying this from within inside the industry, it's pretty broken at the moment. I actually travel around the country. I teach CEOs how to scale their businesses. And one of the things that I asked for a while was, how many of you have had a coach? And to my surprise, it was like 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was just the groups that I was speaking to or if that's universal, but everywhere I went, 9 out of 10. And then I started thinking like, well, why are they still having trouble? And I said, well, how many of you that have had a coach have had a bad experience with a coach?
A lot of people.
9 out of 10 of those hands.
Right. Yeah.
It's just something fundamentally wrong with it.
People. Yeah. It's just, and they don't have a process for like figuring out. There's no real definitive process for figuring out how do you match with me, and is that the right way to do it?
That's exactly it. So there's a couple of things.
So I'm going to try and be your guy.
Yeah. And there's a few things that happen. One, coaches and consultants are generally wonderful people. Like, it's not that there's a bunch of shizers out there trying to steal money. Any industry has that, but that's not what's going on.
No.
Fundamentally, where we got it wrong was we were hiring people to do what worked in the past that wasn't working anymore, instead of hiring people who could help us know what we needed to do to get to the future.
Makes sense. Because you can't keep doing what you were doing and have a bad result. Don't they call that like the definition of stupidity or something? Just
insanity. Yeah, I think. And so we were hiring people to help us, get our existing strategies to work.
Uh-huh.
What we really needed to do is hire someone to help us understand what the next set of strategies needed to be.
How do you get to the next level? Right.
And we banged.
You weren't capable of recognizing that at that point, right?
No, I had no idea. I mean, I was 20 something, just early my 30s. My first executive team meeting I led. Like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Right. Yeah. Well, trial by fire, right?
Yeah. And for a lot of accidental entrepreneurs, it's the same way, right? They don't have MBAs. They've not done this 9 times. No. And so what that does, though, and what breaks my heart about this whole situation is the isolation that I felt in the process. If I can't figure it out, that sucks.
Right.
If I can't find someone to help me figure it out, I am completely alone.
Of course. Because then you get to hopelessness. Yeah. Like, okay, I couldn't solve the problem, and I can't find somebody to help me solve the problem. Now what do I do?
Yeah.
So and that's people listening out there. That's not a real feeling. Like, you just haven't found the right person, and you got to keep looking, and you got to keep kind of, fitting it in, whether you're looking for right now I'm in the process of getting a virtual assistant because I don't really have an assistant. I used to have a lot of employees, got rid of them, but I think it's going to take me a while to find the right person that can do the things that I want them to do. And it may be painful for a while. I may have to fire somebody. I may have to move on, whatever. Yeah. Don't give up is what I'm saying, right? And I guess you didn't at some point. You just started.
Yes.
Right?
Well, and I didn't have the palate for which someone could misunderstand what you're saying and say, just spray and pray, right? Just keep hiring until you find someone. Right. I just didn't. I lost too much money doing that. The cost of it. I'm not talking about like consulting fees. I'm talking about the $1 million of lost revenue because of bad advice. And that's an expensive way to figure it out.
It is.
What turned the whole thing around for me and has just fundamentally shifted both that business, my perspective on business as a whole, and even my job now is a little book. It's behind me. It's called Predictable Success by a gentleman named Les McEwen. And I actually heard about it on a podcast like this.
Okay.
Les was on a podcast talking about the most exciting topic in the world, business life cycle stages, right? I almost fall asleep just saying it now. It does not sound interesting at all, but what captivated me was his descriptions of these stages, particularly stage 3. It's called Whitewater. Okay. It was like he had a camera in my office. Right? How in the world does this guy know what we're experiencing? And what that Whitewater stage is where the complexity from all the success, by doing the right things in an earlier stage, that accumulates complexity to the degree that it overcomes our ability to execute, to deliver consistent quality, to meet the needs of our customers. That's what springs up the silos that you talked about. It's what springs up the leadership challenges. It's what necessitates great management. It's what causes us to have to rethink our strategy and adopt a more holistic approach to business growth. Yeah. We couldn't just work in our business. We had to work on it.
Big time. And I think at that point, people don't realize as small business owners that leadership doesn't apply to when you're only at J&J and Microsoft. Like it's really important to, direct and lead the people so they're on, they're following what the goal of the company is and that they do work together. But I don't know. Do you think that 9 times out of 10, this is an inevitable seawall that you're going to hit and you got to learn how to get over it? Or is there things you could do ahead of time to prepare so you don't hit that wall?
That's a fantastic question. It is an inevitable and invariable stage of development. Now, that's not all bad. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world. In fact, a lot of folks will hear it and think that it's the end stage, right? Stage 7, death rattle. It's not death rattle at all. Yeah. In fact, Whitewater is just one stage away from the peak profitability, scalability, enjoyability of your business. So you can't skip it. And even from a sense of preparing for it, it tends to be a little futile. For example, one of the things that you have to do is you have to add a brake pedal to the organization. You got to have the ability to say no to some things. Right. And if you think about an analogy of, that early company is like a bicycle, and you just, to go faster, you pedal faster, right? And you're not really on the brakes a whole lot if you're trying to go faster. Well, if someone says, hey, you're going to need to brake at some point in time, you're in for this really difficult stage. Here's a set of brakes from a sports car. Go ahead and put those on your bicycle so you don't run into that problem. Well, a couple of things are wrong with that. One, it's ridiculously heavy and hard to get it to fit on your bike. So it just is going to be clunky. It's going to get in your way. It's not going to be all that helpful. And two, the moment you tap those brakes, you're over the handlebar because there's way too much stopping power.
Of course. Right. So that's a very good analogy.
The goal is to figure out how to grow your organization as simply and as quickly as you can for as long as you can. But here's the catch. The thing that you can do to alleviate the pain of Whitewater is by recognizing it as fast as possible.
Okay.
By recognizing that, hey, the game has changed, that's what allows you to make that transition, to change your strategy at the right time, to bring in the coach or consultant who understands that shift that has to happen and can guide you through the process for making it.
I think that's true with a lot of business things, right? Consciousness, not self-consciousness, but being aware of the process. That's why I think a lot of business owners struggle, because they don't take the time to become students of business in general, not necessarily of their business. Maybe they know their business very well, but they don't become students of business. And then you have this experience, I'm sure too, Scott, where you see a business owner who goes from he sells his business, he exits his business, starts a new business, but because he wasn't a student of business, doesn't work for him. Like his first business, he knew. He grew up in that industry. He was apprenticed in that, whatever it was, he could make it work. And now he's struggling. But I think that if we are aware of these things, then sure, then we can recognize them as they come and say, oh, I understand what's happening. Our departments are getting a little bit off the track and nobody's talking to each other. And we got to start having, and maybe I can't handle this. Maybe I got to bring in a consultant, and maybe ultimately I got to bring in a new CEO. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's right on point.
Yeah, and it's this idea of being a student is really important, but it's not enough. And this goes straight to the heart of the issue that you mentioned beforehand.
Yeah,
I think the number one question that we need to ask ourselves in business is not, how do we have success? What do we need to do to succeed? Why are we in this business? Who do you need on your team? Those are all very important questions. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But there's one question that changes the answer to all of those, and that is, when are we? Right? What stage are we in, and what is appropriate for this stage? Let's take the guy who has been down this road before, right? He gets through the early stage, he gets through the second stage, we call it fun, and he gets to Whitewater and realizes, oh, we need more systems and processes. We need more people who think in terms of system and process. And that works, and they scale, and it's awesome, and he sells, and he goes and starts over, and he's like, I remember when I didn't have all those systems and processes. I don't want to feel that way again. We're going to start with the right systems and processes. And then I see this all the time. They pour into, and they've got beautiful systems and processes. Their CRM is pristine.
Right.
They've got contracts for everything.
And they're all ready to go.
And they're broke,
Right.
right? They're just absolutely broke, because that's not what creates success in the early stage. So by recognizing what stage we're in, that's when we can focus on the things that are most effective in that stage. That's where we can use it as a filter to go find the people both on our team and the consultants and coaches and advisors outside of our team that are appropriate for the stage that we are in.
Yeah. No, there's a lot to be said about that. I appreciate it. Okay, why don't we do this? Let me break for a little commercial. I got a couple of sponsors, as you heard at the beginning of the show. And we'll break for that, and then we'll come back and start to talk about the things that you're doing for people, advice, continue to talk about the mistakes we see people make. But maybe you have some stories about some people that are doing it right. And maybe you have some other books for us, too. I always like books. That's when you saw me come off camera. I was writing down the name of Predictable Success. I'll definitely look at it. So let's take a break, and we'll come back. Here's a word from our sponsors. Looking to market and grow your business? Or perhaps you're just getting started and want to hit the ground running? AWeber is the best choice for online email marketing and automation of your business. From maintaining a subscriber list to drip campaigns and landing pages, AWeber gives you tools and integrations that make marketing easy and fun. As our partner and sponsor, we use all their tools to promote the podcast and market our law firm. AWeber, the best alternative for online marketing. For over 30 years, the Alternative Board, or TAB, has built a thriving community of forward-thinking CEOs and business owners who want to radically improve their companies. Through unique combinations of one-on-one business coaching, participation in monthly TAB board meetings with other non-competing owners, a suite of strategic tools, and customized strategic planning workshops, TAB membership can deliver greater strength to your business and a better work-life balance for you and your family. All packaged in a streamlined and affordable service that the people at TAB invite you to try risk-free. Are you struggling with managing advertising due to a lack of time or expertise? Perhaps you're facing challenges in scaling ads for your store. Are you feeling lost when strategies have no success? GSM Growth Agency is your reliable partner in overcoming these business challenges. Feel the impact of collaborating with a team dedicated not only to short-term goals, but also to building long-term partnerships and achieving sustained success. Embark on an exciting journey to redefine the possibilities of e-commerce and create a legacy of unparalleled excellence. Take decisive action now. Follow their link in the show notes to receive a complimentary audit of your Shopify store conducted by a GSM expert. Propel your e-commerce game to new heights with GSM Growth Agency. Follow the link in the show notes to learn more about all of our sponsors. And now back to our show. All right, we're back. So I appreciate your patience. So let's keep talking about it, because I think all this stuff is really important. I've had a couple of guys on here who they consider themselves process scientists. One guy's building a website for managing teams and so forth. I think it's an interesting. I think that's the one thing, is that if you talk to a business owner, even if they're successful, right, they're being successful, they can't really describe and tell you what's the process for doing this. They're not going to hand you a bunch of manuals. Oh, Scott, no problem. You want to learn how to, run and edit our podcast? Here's a book, and here's how you do it. You want to run the office from over here, and I think that's a real. I guess that's how they have the problem. They run into what you call Whitewater, right? Because they don't have those processes in place. Is that true?
Yeah, it's a big, big part of it. And one of the things that I would highlight is that I found that success is much easier to define in terms of principles than it is in terms of practices. Okay. And so one of the things that we'll do is we'll go out and we'll ask someone how they did something, right? instead of really getting to the root of why did you do it that way?
Right.
And Jim Collins talks about this, and I think it's either Great by Choice or How the Mighty Have Fallen. But he says, when the language of success, this is what we do, and this is why we're successful, when that replaces the keen understanding of, hey, this is why we're successful, but under these conditions, we would no longer be successful. It is at that point that an organization begins its decline.
Okay.
And so what we have to do is when you go back and ask people their story, right? You say, hey, how did you build that great company?
Right.
Well, one, you're going to get a very edited version of that story. But two, if you go back and instead say, hey, why did you do it this way at this point? And what else did you try? Why didn't it work? Those are much better questions to ask folks that are on their way.
Definitely. So where does that leave somebody if you're saying basically they're asking the wrong questions is what it comes down to, right?
Yes. Many times I think we do. I think we ask the wrong questions. And again, that was kind of the root of the challenge that I faced in my business. And I think it's the root of the challenge a lot of business owners face is that they're not asking the right questions in the first place. And so even if they're getting the answers to their questions, they're not necessarily useful especially when they're starting to move into a new stage.
Yeah. So better questions, you get better answers. So you started out with a company that was working in the religious industry, the business of religion, basically, and you've expanded the business over the years. And so what kind of companies and industries do you work with now in terms of the scaling that you've been working with them?
Yeah. So once we got out of that Whitewater stage, we got into predictable success. I realized I'm kind of bored. I don't know that I want to keep doing this for this long, because what I found I loved, once I could name it, once I understood what the Whitewater stage was, I realized, no, I'm actually really good at this stage. And I realized, hey, what I'd rather give the best years of my career to are helping other people to recognize Whitewater, to identify the steps to get out of it so that they can get to predictable success as well. So again, another test of what I learned from those early days was, how am I going to transition from being owner and CEO to someone else leading this company?
Yeah.
And so because of the work of Les's book, because of the things that we had put in place, because we knew the right systems and processes to implement, it gave me the time and freedom to really focus on developing the next generation of leaders.
Okay.
And so we were able to go through a succession. And, the proudest point of all of that for me is that they added, I think, 15% the year after I left and 15% again the year after that, and just continued to accelerate and flourish under the new set of leaders. Now, that's always a little hard for the ego. It's like, was I getting in the way of this thing? But that was, again, that was exactly that was the proof of concept. Can this thing go without me? Have I really done what I set out to do over a decade before? And it was fantastically successful. And so that allowed me to give my best hours to opening up this firm. It's called Scale Architects. Mm-hmm. And what we do is we come alongside organizations, founders and their leadership teams, business owners and their teams that are in that Whitewater stage, that may not have language for it yet, but they're like, I feel a lot of those things. Right. And what we do is we help them to do a few things. The first one is to just recognize that stage doesn't mean you screwed up. It's actually that you did the right things. Yeah, right? By doing the right things, you grew. And that's just a huge relief for the whole team.
Yeah, I think it is. For everybody.
And the second thing that we do is help them say, okay, we're in Whitewater. What do we want to do about it? Because there's actually two routes out. Okay. You can drive forward to predictable success. You can change your strategy. You can change how you show up as CEO. You can change your value for systems and processes, or you can actually scale back a little bit, which a lot of folks do, probably 60, 70%. They realize, no, we actually don't need to build a scalable. We don't need to be the next Bain & Company. Right, We're a great boutique firm.
Yeah, right.
I don't need to build a coffee shop chain. I just want to be a barista a few days a week and have a great time doing it, build a strong company. So you can actually go back as well. We help folks to make that decision, and then we give them the clear path to do that.
Okay, so
So it's a lot of fun. When you look at you talked about a couple of stories. So I actually just heard from a couple of clients we worked with last year. Both of them just awesome stories. So both of these clients, we work with folks anywhere from kind of 5 to 250 million. So, but these two that just happened to tell me their stories recently were in the $5 to $10 million range, and both of them added over $1 million to their bottom line just this year.
Wow.
Now, the fascinating thing about that is I don't look at anyone's P&Ls. We don't do any real financial assessment, but the steps that we take, working on things like their org chart, working on things like how they their leadership style as an organization, working on things like alignment, by focusing on those areas where we are making the decisions that are ultimately unprofitable. If we can turn that around, if we can provide the right context for it, and we can get them making better decisions as a team, that's where we can create these transformational results. And so for both of them, they were able to add over $1 million. It was their first time ever breaking the $1 million profit line. And both of them did it in years that they were not anticipating top line growth. And were also able to exceed their top line margins, one by 30% and the other by 75%.
Wow.
In a single year.
Wow. Yeah. But a lot of it takes focus and dedication and awareness and understanding what's going on and not get overwhelmed. I think a lot of people just throw their hands up and they just think it's going to be easy. They have this glamorous view of being an entrepreneur, and the grand opening and the store opens, or you put up a shingle and people are just going to walk in, and then they sit there and they're looking out the window going, what did I do? So I think that's one of the problems. And I think that business owners who have achieved success, you get complacent. You think, oh, well, I deserve this. I mean, I'm obviously at the place where it's all going to run itself now. We're not going to have to worry about this. It's very common with like salespeople that I know in finance and insurance and financial planning, things like that. You build a clientele and you get to the point where you think that you're entitled to not work so hard and everything comes to you, and then it all falls apart. And you're like, well, no entitlements. So I think,
and I think there's another pattern as well. And you even spoke to this earlier of a founder feeling like, hey, this is just as far as I can take my company. Maybe I need to go find a real CEO. And these two stories are really helpful because neither of these folks are what you would imagine as your big corporate CEO type, right? They are both salt of the earth, love their business, love their people, want to see the thing succeed.
Yeah.
No MBAs, no past experience of being a CEO somewhere else. But by understanding that stage, by understanding the way that they needed to shift and pivot, both of them were able to step into that. It had nothing to do with whether or not they had what it takes.
Right.
It was that they didn't know what they needed to do.
It's common. Right. Exactly. Sometimes it's not that you need outside help. You just need outside awareness to let you know what's going on and take a different approach. Yeah.
And so the vast majority of founders that I've met out there, you're not hitting a wall of your capacity and what you're capable of, period. You're hitting a wall of what you're capable of operating the way you are today.
Right.
It's not fatalistic. It's not like you've just hit your ceiling, you can never build a better business. It's that you've hit the ceiling for engaging the way that you have.
Right.
You have to start to show up differently. And the wonderful part about it is the way that you show up is a heck of a lot easier than what you're trying to do right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. It's not that, and I didn't want to, anybody listening, I don't want to lead them down the path that I think that, business owners get to a point where they got to bring somebody else in. I don't think it is. I think you can learn, you can grow, but yeah, you can't do it obviously you can't do it the way you were doing it before, because that's what got you. It got you to where you are, right? But now those skill set, the way you're doing things is not the skill set to deal with the next phase of the business. And you can there. But that's what I meant before when I said becoming more of a student of business itself. So you can learn, meet people like you, recognize what stages you're going through, that it is a process. Yeah. And I as a business attorney, I deal with a lot of business owners. The reason the podcast came about was because I like to talk to people and interview, meet cool people like you. But the name really came about because I had a lot of clients who would come to me after the fact and say, I need your help. I got to close the doors. I'm the guy who's got to go and do all the cleanup and negotiate out of everything and things like that. And after a while, I started realizing, the things that people don't do. And it wasn't that their business was a bad idea. There are businesses that shouldn't be businesses, right? We all know that. But in general, there were good ideas that were poorly executed. And the reason that and I mean, maybe they were successful and then they fell. The reason that they ran into those problems is because they didn't take the time to say, how do I run a business, not this business? And how do I deal with those issues? And what books are out there and what people are out there? Let me find the right coach and the right business consultant. And that doesn't stop. That's a lifetime journey until you get to the point where either you're going to sell it, shut it down, or have your kids come in, which is a whole nother. I do a lot of succession planning and a lot of things with generational stuff. And that is a painful wall to climb when you have the older generation that's running the business. For them they can't just walk out the door and say, okay, I'm fine, good luck. They can't let go, and they want to let go, but they can't. They're worried about their kids. It's like raising your kids, right? You can never give them enough advice. So that's a tough one too. I've had to help families put processes in and say, okay, look, this is the way it's going to work. The kids are the board of directors. They ultimately got to vote on what you do. You could be on the advisory committee, screaming, yelling, give them opinions, but you got to let them, you got to let them go out there and see if they can fly, because they're not going to be able to do it, especially if you're not here and you have a heart attack one day. So I think that's an interesting thing. How can people learn from you and find you and interact with you in terms of your scale architects?
Yeah, what I'd encourage you guys, you said you like books. My recent project that I'm super passionate about is a new book that we put out. It's called The Founder's Evolution. Okay. And in the same way that there are different stages that businesses and nonprofits go through, there are similar stages that individuals, that the founders go through, right? All the way through succession. And so one of the things that happens, though, is for founders, they're largely invisible. Right. There's no outside, mile marker that says the stage has changed.
Right.
And so what I did was, after seeing this happen so many times, after seeing it in my own story, I mapped out where it actually changes. There are 7 distinct stages from pre-launch, that dissatisfied employee you talked about, to stage 7, which I call the visionary founder. And so in the book, what I do is help folks to understand, these are the 7 stages. What stage are you in personally? And what are the 2 or 3 things you need to focus on now? It's not rocket science. It is not nearly as hard as we tend to make it.
Right.
And by understanding what the 2 or 3 things are that are necessary for this stage, you get to discover, hey, these are the 20 or 30 things I don't need to do at this stage. And so we cover all that ground in the book. We've actually made it free for anyone. They can get it at scalearchitects.com/founders.
Okay, we'll put a link in the show notes to get it. Is it also available on Amazon? They can buy the book if they want, things like that?
Yeah, we chose not to go to print for a few different reasons. Most of it because we wanted to have control over how it's distributed and how folks can get their hands on it. So you can get the full copy of the book, the digital version. Basically. Yep. And it's longer than an ebook, but it's not quite as long as a normal book because, let's face it, there's a lot of founders who aren't going to make it through a full book. So we give you just the short and sweet of what you need to know for each and every stage.
Yeah, my book, which is a book about, staying out of court and doing things right, doing things in writing, it's not a story. It's a resource book. By the way, if anybody's listening, if you take your ebook, you have to email it to everybody's got a Kindle email. If they have an Amazon account, you can email it to your Kindle and you can read it on your Kindle. So if anybody's listening. All right. Well, I can't thank you enough. I'm glad we connected on a Friday afternoon. I know you emailed me. You're like, where's the link? And we connected. So and we had a little technical problems at the beginning. But you have any parting words, like any last minute advice or things you want to close the show out with for the people that are listening? Because I think that this topic of all these things that business owners deal with, it just keeps coming up with all the guests that I have on the show. So it's obviously a common thread. So any last minute advice?
One of the things that I have found founders, and I've suffered my share of this as well, is especially when we start to get glimpses of what can be in the future, right? What the predictable success stage looks like, or some future event, we have a tendency to become so fascinated and fixated and optimistic about that event that we can put our joy on hold until we get there. And a story I like to share with folks is, we had our first two children when I was in my mid-20s, and I loved them. They were awesome. I had no idea what to do with them. The first couple of years of their life, I'm like, just give them back when they can kick a ball. We'll have a great time.
Yeah.
And fast forward about 10 years, we had our third when I was in my mid-30s, and I was just a different person at that point.
Of course.
And I really set myself to hey, I'm not going to do it that way. Now, I was no more equipped, right? I was still a guy. I still, didn't have a whole lot to offer, but I just gave myself to having joy in the current stage as opposed to waiting for 2 or 3 years down the road. And can I tell you the amount of joy I experienced, the just beautiful moments that I had with my little girl. I just look back now and there's so many things I missed. And so what I tell folks is, joy is not found in a destination. It is always and forever found in the journey. And so take the stage, and rather than just saying, hey, how can we get out of it as soon as possible? Right. Look at it and say, hey, what joy is available in this stage that we won't get at a later date?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the irony of life, isn't it? You really appreciate it more as you mature, not necessarily at the end, but as you mature later on. Because if you're having kids in your 20s, we didn't have to late 20s, but my parents had me out. They were 21. I don't really young. It's like a fire drill. It's like your hair's on fire and you don't know what you're doing. You're running around and it's hard to, and you may not even have had the maturity to appreciate the things that you appreciate when you're in your 30s and 40s and now my 50s, when you look back. So, well, Scott, I can't thank you enough. We'll put the link in the show notes. I encourage people to go get the book, Looking at Predictable Success. Download your ebook, and let's keep spreading the good word and helping people to not be successful, improve their chances of success. That's the best we can do, right?
There we go.
No guarantees. All right. Thanks for coming on, Scott.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Accidental Entrepreneur. Opening and closing music written and performed by Howie Moskovich and made to order music. For information about Howie and his music services, please follow the link in our show notes. If you like the podcast, please tell others about us. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and most of the other podcast directories. If you like what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review and feel free to share our episodes on social media. If you have any questions or comments, ideas for the show, or you'd even like to appear as a guest, reach out to us by email at info@beinhackerlaw.com.
The Accidental Entrepreneur is hosted by Mitch Beinhacker and produced by Beinhacker Law. If you'd like to learn more about our business and legal services, you can find us on social media or visit our website at beinhackerlaw.com. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe to our feed to be notified of all future episodes.